It's time for Dialogue Conspiracy with political research specialist Mae Brussell, who for 3 years has shared with us her decades' research into political assassinations and abuses of power in this country. Her program relates the news of the week to emerging evidence about the conspiracy which allegedly maintains by force its control over the legislative and judicial processes in America. And now, here's Mae.
Good afternoon. This is Mae Brussell in Carmel, California. Nice holiday, the end of a long weekend holiday. It's May 26, 1975, and this is Dialogue Conspiracy 198. For those of you who keep track on tapes and cassettes of the various shows, I owe you an apology. Last week I had 196, and the week before 196. You can correct your tapes at the beginning or make note on the boxes. If you have an index, this is number 198 in Dialogue Conspiracy. And while we're on the subject, you can order cassettes now. They're $3.60. There is somebody in Sacramento that will duplicate these cassettes, and at the end of the month, I will be making out an index once a month of the subject matter carried on the particular shows, and you can order these, or you can order the reel-to-reel tape by the month. We don't supply them individually, but they're $5 plus postage, and you can order them. The minimum is 4 weeks supply by the month. There's a few other announcements. If you want the article I did on the SLA, the Thunderbird bookstore has them in town. I'm getting letters and envelopes requesting my articles every week, and unfortunately, the first article I did for The Realist, Why Was Martha Mitchell Kidnapped, is now out of print, and I'm holding up the orders that I have on my desk. People send in checks, and I have to see about having a local printer print these or get in touch with Paul Krasner, and then I will get them to you some way. They will be reprinted, I promise you that, but if you're not getting your requests for the articles, they're being held up because I don't have copies of the first article any longer. I hope that those of you that are listening that have tape cassettes or reels take time to copy these shows. They go quickly, and we throw out a lot of names. The format of the show is familiar to those of that listen every week, and then we pick up new listeners from week to week or year to year. The format is to take the news of the events of that current week, this past week, and show how they pertain to past and present political conspiracies and assassinations done by agents of the United States government, various branches of the government, covered by the police department, and even collusion of as high as the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court or the judge in particular cases. I don't generalize on every case. I'm talking about particular cases. But the conspiracy that killed John Kennedy didn't end with that assassination that I studied extensively for so many years, but it's taking place every day, and old conspiracies are surfacing. If you read the newspaper article this morning on new documents on the Rosenberg case, there's messages between the attorneys and the prosecutors on leaking atomic secrets purposely that the Rosenbergs knew nothing about or didn't even handle, in order to be sure that they got the death penalty, both for Mr. Rosenberg and Mrs. Rosenberg. That happened a while back, but this same intent of conspiracy and intent to frame people is documented, and these documents are surfacing to show you the kind of collusion the federal government went to in order to gain convictions. In this case, and in many other cases, and in this particular case, they refer to Judge Kaufman. The judge has promised them a death penalty, and he evidently is in collusion with the prosecutor and people that want to make a Red Scare during that time period in our American history to believe that particular people, especially two Jews, would be handing atomic secrets to the Soviet Union. That's the kind of conspiracy that breaks each day in the news that happened in the past, and then we have our current conspiracies, and I'm going to talk about one of those for the remaining of the program today. I sometimes repeat an old show, sections of it. I try not to bring in new information each week, but wherever it's pertinent and important, and if the message didn't sink in and new evidence comes out to back up what I was saying earlier, I do repeat it when it's necessary. And sections of this program today are new, and sections of them I'll repeat because I consider it an emergency situation that requires your writing to the president about this matter, write to Governor Brown, call various talk shows, KGO or KFI, Hilly Rose, send letters to the editor, and spread the information around after you hear it, because I have projected it out before, as have other people, and it seemed to sit in a dead letter box, and now it's getting more serious, and it involves two people, one by the name of Sirhan Sirhan and the other by the name of Eugene Rangel. December 13th, 1973, a gentleman named Eugene Rangel from Yugoslavia sent a forward out from a book he's writing called From the Vatican to San Quentin. And in this message, Rangel stated that he dedicated his book to Vladimir Alexander Zatko, Z-A-T-K-O, because he had received orders to assume the identity of Zatko. Zatko had died in an automobile crash in 1968, and Rangel, as an agent of the Central Intelligence Agency, was ordered to assume the identity of this particular Zatko, and he dedicated this book to Zatko. And in this book are some remarks in the foreword about the prison systems in the United States, that he had been studying the prison systems while he was in Europe, evidently as an agent. And there's a quotation I read from his book where he says, "Every man has a desire to learn more about the menace that threatens his future, his home, his children, and peace of the world. And that is why I have written this book. And if you will take time to inform yourself, you will find that the prison system in the United States holds no mysteries. Its sponsors have blueprinted their objectives. As an employee in Yugoslavia," he said, in '68, he was assigned to prepare a legal brief on the American prison system, and came to the conclusion while he was in Belgrade that the American prison system threatens the happiness of the entire American community, the safety of every individual, and the continuance of their home, and it will destroy the peace in the United States and thrust it into a condition of anarchy and lawlessness and immorality that passes the imagination. He said the prison system is a major menace of our time. It threatens the very existence of Western civilization. This is an important observation of Mr. Rangel, alias Zatko, because he was soon to come to America and be placed in the California prison system, which he alleges was a trumped-up charge, and at that time he was given the assignment to kill Sirhan Sirhan, $25,000, which he claims is in a bank in Beverly Hills, and he alleges it was given to him by E. Howard Hunt. Now, how can our prison system be a menace to every home and destroy the United States of America? It's very easy, because after he wrote this, and I had this in my possession a long time, came the creation of the SLA inside the California prison system, which was created by the CIA, and the purposes, of course, is to begin a campaign or pogrom against radicals, leftist groups. It caused the existence of the SWAT team to emerge publicly in Los Angeles at the time they killed these particular members. The California prison system created the Zodiac killings, the zebra killings, and the United States prison system has turned zombies out to create violence and terror in our community, preparing to eliminate both the third world and to escalate the cartoon that Conrad drew so beautifully this week of the fourth world, which was the United Nations building with the 10 flags of the oil companies flying in front of nations, the multinational oil companies. And the linear connection between the California prisons and the violence and the fascism that I believe is to come can be documented through various records, including the court records of Mr. Zatko Rangel, or his passport papers if you wanted to investigate it. Now, Sirhan Sirhan's name was in the news this week. All of you saw it, I'm sure. He's been offered a date for parole in the future, and this granting of the date is causing a lot of controversy among certain circles. I was on a radio program yesterday in Los Gatos, and the newscaster was very upset that Sirhan was being paroled. His argument was that there's a constant demand for life in prison or death sentence for a person killing a policeman or prison guard, but the killing of a senator or a candidate for president amounts to nothing in our society. He said if there's no punishment for killing elected officials, then these people will continue murdering and the process will continue. I presented a very good possibility to this person that Sirhan didn't fire the fatal bullet in the head or back or the neck of Robert Kennedy, and that maybe Sirhan was in jail and is in jail now for shooting a gun and firing bullets, but not killing anybody. And if he killed a candidate, just as if you killed a policeman, then maybe the punishment should be the same. But bullets were removed in the Ambassador Hotel from Paul Schrade and Elizabeth Evans and William Weissel and Ira Goldstein and Erwin Stroll. And all these people are alive. There were no fatalities. And there were 2 bullets from the center divider, the pantry door, and 1 from the door frame by the stage, which makes 10 bullets. And Sirhan's gun that he shot can only shoot 8 bullets. And furthermore, the ballistics of the bullet taken from William Weissel are not identical to the bullet injury and the statistics, the ballistic information in Robert Kennedy, his fatal shot, which indicates, and there is much discussion now about the fact that there was a second gun in the Ambassador Hotel, and not only was there a second gun, but that Sirhan, according to the ballistics works, could not have shot Robert Kennedy and murdered him if the fatal shot came from behind his head. The autopsy said he was murdered from 1 to 2 inches behind his ear, back of his head, and there was a gun that went off behind Robert Kennedy, and that man is still alive and out on the streets. And if the ballistics and autopsy records indicate that there were fatal bullets, and we can be sure that our future candidates will be killed if the killers are out on the streets. The death penalty will not ensure the candidates will not be murdered. It is not open hunting season for candidates or presidents. If the killers are out on the streets today, then it encourages other people to participate in political assassinations. There were multiple gunshots at the time George Wallace was shot in Laurel, Maryland in May 1972. We may have an exact duplication of this public assassination attempt if we're investigated thoroughly. The gunman in that case may be alive and free and out on the streets, and Arthur Bremer may have gotten a few bullets into George Wallace and the bodyguard and person in front of him, and maybe there was assistance from another direction. The local police later found 2 guns in Arthur Bremer's car, but the FBI conveniently didn't locate these guns, and they are always the prime investigators in this case. My constant argument against the reenactment of the death penalty, beyond the fact that it's cruel or racist, because people that are defended and are not black, and there are some whites that die, but they're poor. Usually the rich get off. I've argued against the death penalty for years on many, many reasons. I don't believe in it. And if a person actually did commit a murder and isn't a patsy, he should be helped and studied and understand the motives behind such an act to prevent it in the future and not kill him, because then the chain of information is lost. But when you have a death penalty, you have no way to set history straight, even 10 or 20 years later, to what actually occurred. Just like the case of the Rosenbergs, if they were alive in jail, we might find out who forged evidence, who perjured themselves at a trial, and who doctored the evidence that would have confined them for life, much less taking their life. This is what happened in Nazi Germany. Hitler believed in the death penalty, and many patsies were killed. And I think we have to leave the option open to interview these people and wait for new evidence to come in, particularly in these terribly controversial areas. Now, Sirhan was moved just this last week to our local community, and I'll speak about that in a minute. But in Monterey, at Monterey Peninsula College, Dr. Edward Simpson will be speaking here this next Saturday night, May 31st, in room 103. And I urge all the listeners here that are near in our geographic area, by the time these tapes go east, it'll be impossible for any of you to even think of the idea of entertaining or hearing Dr. Simpson, but you may invite him back east to your schools if he'd go to lecture. Local people from Santa Cruz, Watsonville, Salinas, it is worth your effort to come into town to Monterey Peninsula College this Saturday evening, May 31st, room 103. I met Dr. Simpson last year when he gave a lecture at the class that Mr. Fabrizio and I were teaching on conspiracies and assassinations. He is a psychiatrist in private practice now in the area who used to work for the state of California inside the San Quentin prison, and his work with prisoners introduced him to Sirhan Sirhan, who was taken to San Quentin after his trial in Los Angeles, California, on the charges of shooting Senator Robert Kennedy. It is Dr. Simpson's feeling that Sirhan Sirhan did not write that diary that is allegedly written by him, saying that RFK must die. He was the first psychiatrist to get through to Sirhan. There were Jewish doctors there, and because of Sirhan's experiences in Palestine, he felt very prejudiced against them. Dr. Simpson is a man with compassion, of understanding, of objectivity, and you can hear him read some of the tests he gave to Sirhan and the responses he gave as a perfectly normal person who was responding with feeling and sensitivity. I might say that Dr. Simpson was fired from his job at the California prisons when he was beginning to break through with Sirhan. He received a letter, "It's not in the best interest in the state of California that you remain on the staff," and he quietly resigned. I wish he had fought and stayed on, but he quietly resigned. And he feels that Sirhan is intelligent and gives completely honest answers to various tests, as I told you, and that he was programmed, if not hypnotized before, to forget. He was programmed by another professional psychiatrist who kept saying, "You walked up to him, you held the gun, you shot." And Dr. Simpson believes that the reenactment of the crime was literally instructed to Sirhan Sirhan. Well, Sirhan was moved from San Quentin, which is in San Francisco, Northern Bay Area, to Soledad Prison, which is my home territory or terrain that many of the men at Soledad hear my show each week on Dialogue Conspiracy. And the fellow prisoners who are listening there, I hope they pass the word on to Sirhan, if he doesn't have his own radio there, that I have been speaking about him many, many times. And I hope that they protect him and watch over him and don't allow anybody to hurt him now that he's away from that isolated protection that he had at San Quentin. I know that on Dialogue Conspiracy I have mentioned Vladimir Alexander Zatko before, but now this particular person is at Vacaville Prison, and he stands a chance of losing his memory, his mind, identical to Robert Hyde, who was put in Vacaville to have his memory erased, both of them being knowledgeable about the assassination of Robert Kennedy. Zatko needs help, and this is what I want to talk about. The House Committee in Washington is now set up to investigate the CIA in the United States. The Senate Committee under Frank Church is doing a very weak job, but seems to be showing muscle recently. Write to both these committees and write about Mr. Zatko, and I'll tell you why. His prison number is B34189, B34189, in case you want to write to him or refer to him in your letters to public officials. He's at Vacaville, California. And his name is linked, as I say, to defendants Richard Nixon of the Watergate and also to E. Howard Hunt. And now he's being threatened with being deported, and he's been judged by a judge in Marin County as being insane recently, even though his trials show that he was sane when he was put inside the prison and was hired to kill Sirhan. And I first learned of Zatko through Jack Kimbrough, an investigator on the Robert Kennedy assassination, who was receiving help and assisting Roger Hansen, formerly Sirhan's attorney. It was in September the 11th, 1973, that Zatko's problems began. He filed a civil suit in the U.S. court, a civil suit S-2742 that Charles Newsom filed for him against U.S. President Richard Nixon, and it was sent to Honorable Judge Thomas McBride. Now, this was filed in September the 11th, 1973. That was 4 months after the Watergate story really broke, or 6 months after, rather, when Judge John J. Sirica got a note from James McCord that the Watergate involved more than the 7 defendants that were being charged. He claimed it involved the Justice Department, the FBI, members of the White House that had perjured themselves and were covering up a much larger crime. And 6 months after McCord started talking, this particular person, Mr. Zatko, sent a suit and a letter to Honorable Judge McBride to hear this case, which never made the headlines, never got into the Watergate story, and it was sent to various people in Washington, D.C., including Sam Ervin, investigating the Watergate. And of this date, I haven't seen, except for the Zodiac News, any mention of this case. The way it read was, I, Vladimir Zatko, a citizen of Czechoslovakia, incarcerated in San Quentin. There's a little discrepancy. Sometimes he refers to himself as Yugoslavia, and then sometimes as Czechoslovakia. But there may have been a transfer. He may have been born in one place and lived in another when he came to the United States. He said he was incarcerated in San Quentin, and he has an order of deportation dated August 28, 1973. He's been instructed, the court has been instructed that he's linked to two close associates. One is defendant Richard Nixon of the Watergate case, and that he was incarcerated in San Quentin to murder Sirhan. He said these two associates that are close to Nixon are both involved in the Watergate case, and that he will reveal their names in court upon appropriate order issued therein. Zatko said he received an advance payment of $25,000. The sum of the money is untouched, deposited in a Bank of California, and would be presented to the court, and that he has letters in his file in Beverly Hills written to him by E. Howard Hunt, as well as letters, papers, documents to create the circumstances and evidence that Richard Nixon is connected to the assassination of the two Kennedy brothers. And Zatko said under proper investigation of the court, the whole conspiracy could be brought to light. This was signed and notarized September 1973. In the testimony of E. Howard Hunt before the Senate Watergate Committee secret sessions and the Colby Report, also to Howard Baker, there's information that E. Howard Hunt left the CIA in 1970 to join Mullen and Company, and he also kept his CIA clearances. But 5 years earlier, from 1965 to 1970, E. Howard Hunt was in Europe under another cover, but still working for the CIA. That his cover said that he had resigned from the CIA, but that he still, in fact, worked for the CIA. So I think it was interesting that E. Howard Hunt is in Europe in 65 to 1970, and Mr. Zatko was hired, he says, in 1968 in Europe, and has letters and documents corresponding with E. Howard Hunt. This is also the time period before 1970 and the Watergate in 72, when E. Howard Hunt was working for the CIA, that Angela Atwood, Willie Wolfe, Colston Westbrook, and other members of the SLA that were linked to the Central Intelligence Agency were also in Europe. I think that this can't be ignored because of the appeal now of the link of the California prisons to the SLA. Well, what came of this suit that he filed with Judge McBride? Absolutely nothing. Judge John J. Sirica didn't use it. Senator Sam Ervin didn't use it. And as I say, for all practical purposes, only the Zodiac News picked it up because on January 7th, 1975, Ron Wood, another close friend of Sirhan's, revealed the plans of killing Sirhan. He also exposed the story of the second gun in the Ambassador Hotel and wanted to leak a story about this to Playboy magazine. And after he sent these letters from his cell, he was moved to Nevada and separated from Sirhan Sirhan, and he was found hung in the Nevada cell. And that also has not been investigated properly. Well, now Richard Nixon is out of office. This suit was against Richard Nixon, and Mr. Zatko has placed another suit against the Gerald Ford in Washington, D.C., and the suit that he had filed against Ronald Reagan as governor has been changed to Mr. Brown, and he is begging our governor in California to open up this case. He has a new suit that I'll read to you, and he has sent copies to the Washington Post, Time Magazine, NBC, CBS, Chief Justice of the United States Warren Burger, members of the Senate, and the House Committee on the Judiciary. All of these people, including Le Monde in France, have information of a new civil suit that has been placed by Zatko because now he's been declared insane and he can be deported or he can be injected, which he claims he's being injected. And he also has linked the Hughes people to his interviews inside the prison, the Hughes organization, and he's asking for a new hearing and new trials. He doesn't want to be deported, and it is a desperate situation that he is at Vacaville, and you can write up to the attendant there, Dr. T.L. Clanon, C-L-A-N-O-N. I spoke to him personally on the telephone about when Robert Hyde was supposed to have his memory erased at the medical facility, at which time Robert Hyde was sent back down to Soledad, and now he is still alive and well with lawsuits against the California prison system and various persons involved, including the Attorney General of California. So if you want to write to Dr. T.L. Clanon, C-L-A-N-O-N, Vacaville, California, 96588, and write letters pertaining to the condition, the mental condition of Vladimir Zatko, who is in his custody. I think it's very pathetic the way he files his suit, Zatko versus Brown, but under every name there seems to be some conspiratorial links that just make it difficult to believe the truth is coming out. Governor Brown's father, you remember, was a former governor of California. He's retired. He's in a law office in Beverly Hills, and one of his law partners is Joseph Ball, who not only concealed the conspiracy to murder President John Kennedy as a member of the Warren Commission, helping write the Warren Report, but he also represents White House official John Ehrlichman on West Coast affairs, such as the Dr. Lewis Fielding burglary. So how close our Governor Brown is to his father or conflict of interest, I don't know. But now Mr. Vladimir Zatko has an appeal out, and he also is crying for papers of his which are missing. He sent out a letter to various news people dated March 31st, 1975, which is interesting. He said, I, Vladimir Zatko, have on January 22nd, 1975, filed a civil action against U.S. President Ford and several others in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of California. When that action took place, and at this date, there is now missing from the files of either court, and they cannot be located. The action concerns the interrogation of my person by the National Security Agency, the FBI, the CIA, and the U.S. Treasury agents, pertinent to the Howard Hughes station. Now, Zatko claims and he appeals to people to find out. He's written to the Eastern News Media, Congressman, the Chief Justice, the Judiciary, that his papers are missing, his interrogation papers by the National Security Agency, the FBI, the CIA, the U.S. Treasury, pertinent to Howard Hughes station. And he refers to this station in the Atlantic. And he has a quotation pertaining to unidentified flying objects, which I am sure has to do with the Howard Hughes stations in the Bahamas and in Jamaica, and the very fact that these agencies interviewed him and that these papers are missing, and he needs them, shows that there will be cover-up of the Vladimir Zatko case. Now, this new suit that is filed is, he states many things. He states that on April 27th, when he was sentenced to prison, in the first place, he was declared sane. He was not insane, and he was prosecuted as sane. In the court in California, when he was first put in, he never waived his rights to a speedy trial. He refused to plead guilty. They wanted him to plead guilty to the robbery charge, which he refused to do. He claims in the presence of Merrill Davidson, attorney at law, who has on various occasions, numerous occasions, seen Zatko physically assaulted at all times prior to his appearance in court, and this is very important, in the presence of Mr. Davidson, he was given a hypodermic needle against his own will, and drugs were given and are given to him to prevent him from exercising full control over his mind and speech and acts. I still say that a major problem is to find out what drug was administered to Martha Mitchell and who did it, but here you have a man, before he goes to court, being injected against his own will in the presence of Merrill Davidson, attorney at law. Zatko claims the court refused to appoint any interpreter at his trial. He speaks Slovak. They sent a Russian interpreter who was then removed. He issued a 2-page denial of all the charges that were put on him. He was charged for a second-degree robbery, but then when the record was given to him, they had added that he was a forger and that he was convicted of robbery and forgery, which was not true. The charges were never that, and he claims that these are slanderous falsehoods, they're irresponsible allegations, absolutely false. Well, Zatko is claiming they're adding things to his record after the original court trial. Is this true or false? You have to remember the case of Elmer Davis that I refer to frequently, who was tried in a court in Santa Monica, California, on a charge of burglary. In this case, Zatko says his was a robbery. Elmer Davis said his was false. They added other charges to the record and sent him to jail and then to prison anyway, Elmer Davis. And in this case, he was covering E. Howard Hunt's involvement in the Dr. Lewis Fielding burglary in Beverly Hills, California. Daniel Ellsberg's psychiatrist. Elmer Davis went to a court in Santa Monica, pleaded innocent, was charged with the crime, and then later on his record they added the burglary of the Dr. Lewis Fielding office, which turned out to be done by E. Howard Hunt. Now you have a parallel here with Mr. Zatko, who claims that he was tried in a court, that he was innocent of the robbery charges, and then when he gets to jail, they add other charges to his original count that didn't exist before, and coincidentally, he says that he was working for E. Howard Hunt in the murder contract of Sirhan Sirhan. I don't think these are coincidences. The Elmer Davis case with E. Howard Hunt in the CIA or Vladimir Zatko in the CIA, I don't believe they're coincidence at all. Zatko claims that he was denied the right to the hearing, to his hearing, pursuant to California Penal Code 1368, in spite of the clear fact that he was judged sane before. He has not appealed his case to the state Supreme Court or federal courts yet, and he needs this appeal, and he needs your help to keep him alive, to keep his brain from being erased, such as the brain of Robert Hyde that they wanted to erase, or hire a contract killer. The same parties that are working on Zatko parallel the Elmer Davis case, the Robert Hyde case, and they're very important because, remember, as Zatko wrote on his introduction of the prison systems, if it happens to them now, it's going to happen to you later. You can be sure it will. It isn't that these drugs are made just to inject Martha Mitchell or Alexander Zatko. They're going to come home to roost if you don't get righteously indignant about the information I'm sharing with you today. December the 16th, 1974, and December 20th, 1974, David Maneri Jr., a judge at Marin County in San Rafael, declared Eugene Rango, alias Vladimir Zatko, insane after his 4 years of rehabilitation, in quotes, in which the murder attempts to kill Sirhan were stopped because he wanted them stopped and didn't want to do this, and they threatened him with deportation. They brought a man over here, asked him to do something. When he refused it, they threatened him with deportation, and they give him a charge of insanity, which can enslave him for life. The same thing happened down in Los Angeles with Muram Kurbekovic. He was brought over from Yugoslavia through Germany to Canada. He was given $1,000 a month. He was charged with the bombings at Pan Am Airport in Los Angeles and called the deaf-mute alphabet bomber. He speaks English. He was well paid, and he can be threatened also with deportation, and he's in jail claiming that people that own the Los Angeles Police Department, naming the CIA, were behind this operation. Well, the trouble with Zatko, his troubles began when he wrote to the judge and when he refused to murder Sirhan Sirhan, so that now he has been declared insane by the judge just recently, and he is sent to Vacaville to the medical facilities. The original trial in California, if you want to look up the record, was People versus Zatko, A06105, California Superior Court. If you write to me and send me a self-addressed envelope and want some information to look up these names or court records, to check this out and put a chain of command to investigate it from the bottom up to see the original records of what was there, and then later what he says was added, I think we could stop the whole chain of conspiracies in California by following these steps one by one and looking into how these particular people are brought from Europe or taken off the streets of America or out of prison and offered these goodies, and if they don't perform, they're judged insane and sent to the medical facilities at Vacaville. In 1973, in September 1973, Mr. Zatko said this is it's something he sent to the judge in California. This is what he wrote, section Roman numeral 5. I don't have time to read the whole thing. He said, during the imprisonment here, I've been interrogated by the FBI, the Secret Service, and other law enforcement agencies in the United States and federal, state and federal. And the agents thereof have tortured me, they have beaten me, they have humiliated me, and under the same period I was given hypodermic needles, a substance that caused me to totally lose control of my mind, free will, and senses. This is in addition to his court appearances. They have paralyzed my left leg and ruined my health entirely for the rest of my life, and I'm not able now to account for things I sign at a particular moment because," he said, "they are giving me drugs and I am illegally deprived of my physical and mental facilities." This was notarized and signed September the 20th, 1973. Now, in California, we have an attorney general who used to be the district attorney at the time that Sirhan was prosecuted, and his name is Evel Younger, and he now is the attorney general of California. And it's in the best interest of E. Howard Hunt, or the attorney general of California who prosecuted the Sirhan case, to keep the story from being told. And one way to keep it from being told is either to murder Sirhan. If his life is on the line, they lock him into solitary confinement. They can still get him another time. If he's on the mainland, main line in Soledad or wherever, he has to be very careful, because as long as the attorney general who prosecuted him doesn't answer a lawsuit that was charged against him and ignores it and becomes the attorney general of California, and he controls the prison system, the formation of the SLA, or the condition of Vacaville where Zatko is, then we have to look at who's behind the chain of command and who can he go to for help. In 1970, June the 4th, in 1970, Theodore Chirac, who made the movie The Second Gun, and it hopes to get it out to the public soon, filed a case in the Superior Court of the State of California, and I have read it on the air, and I'm going to read part of it again. It's by Theodore Chirac on behalf of himself and all other residents of California. And the suit is against Chief of Police Ed Davis of Los Angeles. That's the chief who came out last week and said you should get your own guns and do your shooting because the police can't, there are not enough of us to protect you. And then he arrested 500 young people at a rock concert instead of going into more serious crimes. Ed Davis is a defendant in this suit from 1970, and so is Robert Houghton, who was immediately promoted to Sacramento for a larger job, who used to be a deputy chief of police in Los Angeles, and then Evel Younger, who was a district attorney in Los Angeles. They're defendants in the case, and the case is about Government Code 54950, which provides as follows. In enacting this chapter, the legislature finds and declares that the public, commissions, boards, and councils, and other public agencies exist to aid in the conduct of people's business. It is the intent of law that their actions be taken openly and their deliberations be conducted openly. The people of this state do not yield their sovereignty to the agencies which serve them. The people, in delegating authority, do not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for them to know. The people insist on remaining informed so that they may retain control over the instruments they have created. Now, Evel Younger was named as a defendant in this lawsuit because as public prosecutor, he was responsible for the prosecution of all public offenses, and he is responsible for the supervision and control and regulation of the office of the DA. But this suit claims that in the trial of the people of the state of California versus Sirhan Sirhan, and the murder of Senator Robert Kennedy, that Attorney General Evel Younger, who was then the district attorney, empowered and had the responsibility to set the policy for and make and enforce all necessary and desirable rules and regulations of the office, and that he is sued individually and in his capacity of office because he has suppressed and continues to suppress important and valuable and relevant information concerning the investigation of the murder of Senator Robert Kennedy, and particularly concerning the prosecution of the case in the trial, as known as the State of California versus Sirhan Sirhan, and that he continues to deprive the citizens and residents of the State of California of their full and uncensored information concerning this said murder. Last week, Alan Lowenstein, former congressman, came out with the ballistic evidence, again reasserting what the researchers and ballistic experts have said of the differences in bullets in Mr. Weisel and in Robert Kennedy, the autopsy reports, and also 10 bullets which exist, and Sirhan's gun shoots 8, and the Los Angeles County officials still covering up this crime that have followed in the steps of D.A. Younger, who moved up to become the Attorney General. They said, we will not open this case to sensationalism. Now, in this particular case, with the ballistic evidence, the autopsy evidence, the Medical evidence is there. The scientific evidence is there of a conspiracy. And you have the public officials saying, we won't answer it, it's sensational. You can be sure that the fascist state, the police state, is moving along very, very rapidly. You can be sure that people like Mr. Zatko don't get the attention of Judge Sirica or Sam Ervin, who have the authority to investigate these cases, that it is not called the intention of Judge McBride to take this into consideration, and that the judge in San Rafael declares Zatko insane, and then he's sent to a medical facility where he may already be altered by the time I'm on the air. He may not have any memory. The deportation papers may be going. I'm sure that he won't be deported because he may tell someone in Europe who will believe his story, where Americans don't believe it. I'm sure they wouldn't set the chance to deport him, but they throw that over him. But by the time he gets deported, if he does, he may not even know his name or who he is. He knows that he took the name of a man in 1968 who was killed in an automobile accident. He says he was killed in an automobile accident in Italy in 1968. And this is the time that E. Howard Hunt was in Europe. Why haven't we had this case go to court where we see the letters of E. Howard Hunt brought forth? Is this man insane or isn't he? If he had a trial in Santa Monica and he was charged with a robbery, and 4 years later there's a forgery on the case, you know it was planted, it's accessory after the fact, that the records didn't show it in the first place. If they declare him insane now and he wasn't insane then, when did the diagnosis come? When he divulged that President Richard Nixon gave him $25,000 to kill Sirhan Sirhan. And why in his case is he mentioning the Howard Hughes Corporation and the National Security Agency and the Treasury Department? Why did they come to visit him at San Quentin? These are important questions to ask because there is no court of law you can go to if the case of Ted Chirac can't be opened up, that the Attorney General of California or Robert Houghton and Chief of Police Davis, all three men promoted. Davis stays on as the head of the police department. He was not removed after many scandalous exposures, such as Louis Tackwood bringing out a book, The Glass House Tapes. The response of the police department of Ed Davis at that time when the book came out in 1972 was there must be a Bolsheviki around, that Tackwood's a Bolsheviki. He's not red, right, left, or anything else. Louis Tackwood is exposing a fascist government that was planning killings in San Diego at the time of the Republican Convention. So to say he's a Bolsheviki doesn't fit in with the evidence that existed of what Tackwood said. So now the police say we don't want sensationalism, and I think that that underscores the forgery, the perjury done to keep Zatko confined, the intensity of wishing to inject him or erase his memory, the lawsuit of Robert Hyde against the California prison system, which is pending. He wrote to me he's going to get a polygraph test on some of these allegations that the California prison system formed the Zodiac, the Zebra killing, the SLA, and harbors the conspiracy that conceals the people who killed Robert Kennedy and John Kennedy. Zatko wrote, as I say in the foreword of his book, that the California prisons holds the key to the future of America, and that unless we open it up, there will be anarchy or lawlessness. But I suggest you write letters, as I said in the beginning of this show, write letters to Governor Brown in California, write letters to Gerald Ford, write to the Senate Judiciary, the House Judiciary, and the Senate Committee, Senator Church, investigating the CIA reports, and let's get Mr. Rangel, Eugene Rangel's actual passports on the table. Let's get the year that he came into America, the country he came from. Get the letters that he says two Watergate people contacted him with, and the $25,000 that's in a bank. Let's open up these things and find out who visited him, which officials in San Quentin, and see if we can save his life and save our own. In doing that, you save your own, but save his now and save Sirhan's, and let's get to the truth of these matters, because a lot of good people are investigating this night and day. So welcome Sirhan to the Soledad area. I will be sending messages to you through your friends if you don't listen, and I hope they keep you alive and informed if anyone there is contracted to murder you.
This has been Dialogue Conspiracy with political research specialist Mae Brussell, who for 10 years has been researching the facts behind political assassinations and conspiracies in this country. Dialogue Conspiracy originates with KLRB FM in Carmel, California.